But before then, it's back to our political editor, Lyndall Curtis, at Parliament House.
Thank you, Kim, and we're joined now by the Greens leader, Milne. Milne, welcome to ABC News 24. You've had a relatively short time to have a look at the budget. Are you happy with what you see?
Well, we're saying it's good for teeth and bad for brains. Essentially, I'd have liked to have seen much more of a strategic direction for the nation reflected in the budget. The Greens strongly opposed the tax cuts for big business. That has freed up $16 billion over a decade, and we would have liked to have seen that money spent with a big investment in implementing the Gonski Review. For example, in education, we need to spend $5 billion in education, but we would have also liked to have seen the most vulnerable Australians on New Start helped in a systemic way, so a $50 increase in New Start right across the board.
So the things the government has done for the most vulnerable, the supplement, and also the helpful things like childcare fees if they're going back to work or studying, that's not enough?
No, it's not enough. Some of those things are actually useful, but if you look at the people on New Start, they're getting $210, which is effectively 4 weeks' worth of their $50 increase that they should have had. So really those people have got $4 a week. That's effectively a cup of coffee, and that's all. And they are the most vulnerable people. We would have liked to have seen the money start with them and then go up from there. So that's an issue for us. In terms of other things in the budget, we're really pleased to see a start in the Denticare. That was part of our agreement with the Gillard government, and seeing that $345 million going into a blitz on public dental waiting lists, that's great. It's a foundation for this reform, $550 million or thereabouts all up. Very pleased to see a start on the National Disability Insurance Scheme. That's good. But unfortunately there's not a lot for, as I said, education, no new money. Doubling the fees for maths and science students in universities, not a good idea. And also not much in terms of increasing productivity, research and development, actually driving the nation in the right direction.
Although the government might say, given the scale of the cuts it had, that there are quite a lot of things that it decided not to cut into as well.
Well, there's still not a lot in terms of research and development. You can't be a clever country in the future unless you invest in education, research and development. So we would have liked to have seen that. The government had the opportunity to cut the fuel tax credits for the mining industry. That would have been $2 billion, and that would have enabled them to keep their promise globally to maintain a commitment to 0.5 of gross national income by 2015 for foreign aid. I think that's a big problem for them, because the international community will not look very favourably on Australia choosing to allow the mining industry to maximise their profits at the cost of our most vulnerable developing country neighbours.
But that promise will be delivered just 1 year later.
But our global commitment is to 2015, and you've got governments like the UK, for example, who have been in a lot more economic trouble than we are, who are sticking with that in spite of the cuts that they've had to make.
Now, you are not just a disinterested observer in these things. You have, the Greens have a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives. You hold the balance of power in the Senate. The way the government has structured this budget, taking money from companies, taking money from executives and channeling it into the pockets of low to middle income earners, does that make it much harder, if you wanted to sit and unpick some of it and deliver it to the things you want?
Well, we've guaranteed supply to the government, so there's no question about those bills going through.
It doesn't mean you've guaranteed a surplus to the government, though,
no, but the point I was about to make is that the other pieces of legislation which deliver some of these programs will have to be negotiated through both houses of Parliament, and we want to make sure that the most vulnerable people are the people who are the most supported, and New Start is certainly a focus for us. But also you've got those people who have lost out in terms of single parent benefits and so on. So we're going to look at all those to make sure we get a fair outcome for Australia, and that we genuinely do help the people most in need. Having said that, I'm pleased with the thrust of a more equitable outcome for Australia, and that's what the Greens actually have driven through saying we wouldn't support the tax cuts to big business, but rather we wanted it spent on equitable outcomes. We'd like to see more in education.
Given the government's commitment to a surplus, if you increase spending to education, if you increase the New Start allowance, the money is going to have to come from somewhere else within the budget, isn't it?
Well, we've told the government we would support a number of revenue-raising measures, and the fuel tax credits is one. They've chosen not to go there. I think that they could go there still. There are other ways of raising money too. One of the things we haven't talked about is the clean energy package, which I'm really pleased to see is being implemented in full in the budget. And of course that means people will now get the benefit of the tax-free threshold going from 6,000 to 18,000, and that's because of carbon pricing. And I think out there people don't actually make that connection. Plus, of course, the compensation is coming from money raised from the polluters. Half of that is going back in compensation to households. So those changes are integral to the implementation of putting us on the right steps towards a more innovative, clean energy future.
Is the opposition in some ways right when it says part of the payments to middle and low income earners, things like the school kids bonus, things like the family tax benefits changes, are in part topping up the compensation for the carbon tax to soften the potential blow and maybe make people feel a little more comfortable with it coming in?
Well, certainly the timing is coincidental at best.
Strangely coincidental?
Strangely coincidental, that's certainly the case. Having said that, though, those benefits will help people at this particular time, but we would have liked to have seen them targeted really to the most vulnerable. The key question for the Coalition is, though, they are now saying they will support all of those changes with the exception, I think, of the education one. And the question for Tony Abbott and Joe Hockey is, how are they going to pay for it? How are they going to reduce emissions? Are they going to tax people in order to pay the polluters? So how are they going to pay for all of that?
They're not in government yet. It's up to the Labor government to deliver on the things it's promised.
Yes, that's right, and that's what its budget's designed to do. But now we've got the Coalition saying they will support the bits that they think are popular, but they're not prepared to say how they would fund it. And that's something Australians need to really think about, because we're coming into the election frame, if you like. The Coalition is trying to say that it is economically responsible, and what we're seeing here is not economic responsibility or climate responsibility or any kind of responsibility in terms of economics. So let's see where they're going to get the money from.
In the end, you need Labor to be re-elected at the next election, don't you, in order to keep the carbon package you helped put together intact. Given the polling figures we've seen over quite a long period of time, is this the sort of budget that's going to help Labor, or is it like many budgets past, going to sink without a trace?
Hard to say. I think that certainly the systemic things that are good, like the clean energy package, like the National Disability Insurance Scheme, like Denticare, those things will matter and people will see that. As to the one-off cash bonuses and things, I think they come and go, and people are pretty cynical about those in the longer term. But the Greens' job, of course, is to maximise our vote by bringing about long-term change for the future, and education funding is certainly a key part of that.
So do you think this will help boost Labor's stocks and your own stocks as well, because you are tied very much to the Labor government, aren't you?
Well, the Greens are our own entity, if you like. We've driven a lot of substantial changes in the budget, not least of which is Denticare, and I'm very pleased to say we've also saved the cultural institutions from that efficiency dividend, so they'll be getting an extra $40 million. We've got the new money going into high-speed rail, a whole lot of initiatives that are very futuristic and nation-building, and I hope the community sees that happening.
Christine Milne, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And now on